The Holocaust carried out by Nazi Germany and its allies during World War II, resulting in the deaths of 6 million Jewish people. It began with the rise of Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party in 1933, whose extreme anti-Semitic beliefs blamed Jews for Germany's struggles and painted them as a danger to the so-called Aryan race. Once in power, the Nazis imposed increasingly harsh measures, including the Nuremberg Laws of 1935, which stripped Jewish citizens of their rights and set the stage for widespread persecution. Conditions worsened after the start of World War II in 1939, as Nazi forces expanded across Europe. In occupied regions, Jewish communities were forced into overcrowded ghettos under appalling conditions. By 1941, Nazi leaders began enacting the final solution, their plan to annihilate the Jewish population. This led to the construction of extermination camps, such as Auschwitz, Treblinka, and Sobibor, where millions were murdered in gas chambers. Jews were not the only targets. The regime also persecuted Romani people, disabled individuals, Slavs, political opponents, and members of the LGBTQ community. Mass shootings, forced labor, death marches, starvation, and inhumane medical experiments claimed countless lives and left deep scars on survivors. When Allied forces liberated the camps in 1945, the full scale of the horror was revealed. By then, around 6 million Jews, roughly two-thirds of Europe's Jewish population, had been killed, along with about 5 million others from targeted groups. The Holocaust remains one of the darkest chapters in human history, and the voices of its survivors stand as a lasting warning against hatred and intolerance. RMS Titanic was the pride of the White Star Line, a massive ocean liner, nearly 900 feet long, fitted with the latest technology of 1912. She was called unsinkable. On April 10, 1912, she left Southampton, England, bound for New York City. On board were over 2,200 people, wealthy socialites, immigrants seeking a new life, and crew from across the world. The ship carried lifeboats for barely half of them. 4 days into the voyage, ice warnings began to arrive from nearby ships, but the Titanic pressed on at near top speed. On the clear, cold night of April 14th, at 11:40 p.m., a lookout spotted an iceberg dead ahead. The crew tried to steer away, but it was too late. The iceberg tore a 300-foot gash along the starboard side. Water began flooding 5 compartments, one more than the Titanic could survive. Captain Edward Smith realized the truth. The ship was going to sink. Lifeboats were lowered, but many left half empty. Women and children were given priority. In the freezing darkness, the ship's band played to keep passengers calm. At 2:20 a.m., April 15th, the Titanic's lights flickered and went out. The bow slipped beneath the waves. The stern rose high, then broke away. Within minutes, the great liner vanished beneath the Atlantic. Over 1,500 people died in the icy water. Only about 700 survived, rescued by the RMS Carpathia hours later. The tragedy shocked the world and led to sweeping maritime safety reforms. Today, the Titanic rests nearly 12,500 feet below the ocean's surface, a rusting monument to ambition, hubris, and loss. More than a century later, one question still haunts the story. Could so many lives have been saved if the warnings had been heeded? The Chernobyl disaster, one of the most devastating nuclear incidents in history, occurred on April 26, 1986, at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant in the city of Pripyat, Ukraine. The accident unfolded during a late-night safety procedure on Reactor 4, intended to mimic a total power outage and check how the reactor's emergency systems would perform. But a mix of operator mistakes and serious design weaknesses in the reactor turned the test into catastrophe. The reactor's output fell to nearly zero, and the attempt to restore it pushed the system into instability. With key safety systems shut off, control was lost. A sudden surge in power triggered an explosion inside the reactor core, blowing the roof apart and releasing enormous amounts of radioactive material into the air. Fires erupted, and the radiation spread far beyond Ukraine's borders, affecting Belarus, Russia, and much of Europe. 2 workers died instantly that night, and in the days that followed, 28 more, including firefighters and plant staff, succumbed to acute radiation sickness after receiving lethal doses while battling the flames and damage. In total, around 50 deaths were directly attributed to the explosion and immediate radiation exposure. The long-term consequences were even more severe. Tens of thousands of residents were evacuated, and the exclusion zone around Chernobyl remains uninhabited even now. Radiation exposure has been connected to thousands of cancer cases, particularly thyroid cancer, along with other serious health conditions. Estimates suggest the total death toll from radiation-related illnesses could reach between 4,000 and many tens of thousands over the decades to come. On September 11, 2001, the world witnessed one of the darkest days in modern history. A coordinated wave of terrorist attacks against the United States, orchestrated by the extremist group Al-Qaeda. 19 hijackers took control of 4 commercial passenger planes. At 8:46 a.m., American Airlines Flight 11, a Boeing 767, slammed into the North Tower of New York's World Trade Center. 17 minutes later, at 9:03 a.m., United Airlines Flight 175, also a Boeing 767, struck the South Tower. Both skyscrapers were left burning, with entire floors engulfed in flames. The assault continued at 9:37 a.m., when American Airlines Flight 77, a Boeing 757, crashed into the Pentagon in Washington, D.C. The 4th aircraft, United Airlines Flight 93, never reached its intended target, believed to be either the White House or the U.S. Capitol. Passengers, aware of what had happened in New York, fought back against the hijackers, forcing the plane to crash in a field near Shanksville, Pennsylvania at 10:03 a.m. At 9:59 a.m., the South Tower collapsed into a cloud of dust and debris. The North Tower followed at 10:28 a.m., bringing down much of the surrounding World Trade Center complex. In total, 2,977 people lost their lives, 246 aboard the 4 flights, 2,606 in and around the Twin Towers, and 125 at the Pentagon. Thousands more were injured. In the aftermath, global security measures were reshaped, and the U.S. launched the War on Terror, beginning with the invasion of Afghanistan. In August 1945, near the end of World War II, the United States carried out the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The goal was to push Japan into surrender and avoid a full-scale invasion, as the Pacific conflict had dragged on brutally, with no sign of Japan backing down. On the morning of August 6, 1945, an American B-29 dropped the first atomic bomb, nicknamed Little Boy, over Hiroshima, a key military and industrial city. Loaded with uranium-235, it detonated at 8:15 a.m., unleashing the force of about 15,000 tons of TNT. The explosion flattened much of the city, killing around 70,000 to 80,000 people instantly. In the following months, radiation exposure and severe injuries pushed the death toll beyond 140,000 by the end of the year. Survivors faced burns, illness, and long-term health effects, while much of Hiroshima lay in ruins.